everyone. We're ready to start. Thank you all for being here. We want to apologize for being late. We had some unexpected delays, but you'll see the outcome of the delay because we did some recording of a live session. As you know, we organized this talk as part of a program for the last day of the festival, and we're very lucky to have Akua today not just perform for us, but have her willing to talk to us about her music, her struggles, her inspirations. And as you probably know, Akua is a poet. She's a profound lyricist. She's an MC. She's a hip-hop diva, but she's also an activist.
That's true.
And a scholar.
Uh-huh.
Who teaches at college, and she does her PhD research, or used to do it, but yeah. I mean,
Is that me?
Yep. She's a very, very interesting persona. So all I can say is prepare to hear very much of inspiring thoughts from her today. And Akua, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thanks for coming. Sorry we were late.
Yeah. I imagine this talk to be informal, as you can see, which for us is actually very sentimental, because this is your first time in Serbia, and we have the privilege to have you here, perform for us and talk to us. But I also wanted this talk to be educational.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, apart from your music, I'd like to also focus on some political topics.
Absolutely.
So that's all right with you?
Totally.
Great.
That's all right.
So let me start by asking, is Akuom Naru a pseudonym, and what's the story behind it?
You know what the thing is? No, it's my name. Because you know, Saul Williams has a poem where he says, "Let your children name themselves and claim themselves." And so I had to name myself and claim myself. There's so many stories behind it. Can I answer that question last?
Of course.
Then I have time to think about what story I want to tell right now, because I feel like every day the story changes.
Can I ask then, are pseudonyms an important part of hip-hop culture, or is it just a strategy to sell the music on the market?
Well, I think that naming is important. Naming practices are important in any culture. I feel like that's just fact. And clearly in hip-hop, like, people choose their names for whatever reason, and which has to do with, or other people chose names for them that they kept. And some people, I can't speak for other people. Like, for some people, they wear their name and that's who they are now, or who they became. And for other people, it might be a marketing ploy. I mean, I don't know.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's your point of view.
Yeah.
How did you start doing music?
Well, I grew up in the church, in the black church. So I started making music because I grew up listening to music and hearing like great musicianship on a weekly basis, because I come from like a real church family. But I started because I always loved to read poetry, and always loved, and at some point, you know, being a little girl reading became being a little girl writing. And that's when I used to think poems had to rhyme in order for it to be a poem. So then what was the difference between that and a rap when there's a beat playing? At some point, roses are red and violets are blue became roses are red and violets are blue. I mean, it's just the chant, the incantation, and the rhythm that draws the distinction between the two. So I've been doing it since I was a really little girl, like really, really young person, little girl.
But did you have any musicians who inspired you the most, or some genres?
Well, I mean, really gospel, because I grew up in the church, and my grandmother really had it so that you couldn't listen to anything else at home. Like, we had a band, so it was really James Cleveland, it was Shirley Caesar, it was like the Winans family, you know. And in gospel music, you hear, with black music, there's such a thin line between one genre and the next. So you hear blues, you hear jazz, you hear soul, and all of that. So gospel.
Gospel. That's a pretty. I like the answer. But so far you've recorded 3 albums: The Journey of Flame, Live in a Flame session, and the last one, The Miners Canary. So the first 2 album titles are very clear and direct. But can you tell us? Can you explain The Miners Canary?
Yeah, The Miners Canary as a title came about through a series of conversations that I had with a friend of mine, Dr. Trisha Rose. You might know her.
Yeah, I do.
And we talk a lot about blackness and like the black experience within the U.S. and abroad. and also just about, you know, we talked about a lot of things, and about the American empire and like how it developed and what it means for my people in that context, and like the fact that this entire system is dependent upon us. Just like if you look at the mining institution and how this canary would fly into the mines, and you know, if the canary survived, then there was enough, you know, like then these poisonous gases were not going to kill anybody, obviously. But if the canary died, then that meant they couldn't work that day, and that was an indicator for them. So it's a metaphor for many things. But actually, then that meant that the entire institution was dependent upon that canary's life. And why did she have to make that sacrifice? I found that to be like a great metaphor for what I wanted to communicate. And it's also the title of a book called The Miners Canary that kind of makes that point. And it's about, it's about racism within a so-called post-racial America.
Whose book is it?
Lonnie Guinier. And
I think I know, yeah.
She wrote it with someone else. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. It's a really great read.
Cool. So as a performer, as a poet figure, are you a canary or a miner in a metaphor, or is it a much broader metaphor?
I feel like it's a much broader metaphor, but the metaphor is pregnant with multiple
meanings,
metaphors. You know what I mean? So sometimes I guess, yeah, like today I'm the canary. But it's a lot. The canary doesn't just represent one; it represents the whole.
Yeah, the group. Then let's talk about the cover of the album.
Sure.
It's a visual reference to a very famous photograph.
Right.
But can you tell us something more about it? Because I don't know if people know about it.
All right. So the album cover was basically, it was, I mean, so Huey Newton, who you might know obviously because he's one of the founders of the Black Panther Party, has a famous picture where he's sitting in this chair where he has a spear in one hand and a rifle in another. And I wanted to pay my respect to him, to the mission, and like what that represented by interpreting it today. And being a female body, a black female body doing that. So instead of a rifle, I had a microphone. And it was just, and I know that images can be very powerful, and I took a lot of time to think about how I wanted to interpret his image. And then there's an amazing Jamaican-American painter named Tamara Natalie Madden, and we sent her the photograph, and she wanted to interpret it. So she painted it like on a huge, like 5-foot canvas, and we had it scanned in the laboratory to ultimately create the album cover.
Cool. But does that mean that your music is also a way of fighting for social justice, if a microphone is a weapon? I
mean, to be honest, like it has to be a fight because there's just so much that's just wrong with what this is. But I'm not gonna. That's my only weapon. I mean, what else can I do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I can't. If you were to attack me right now, I'm gonna try to save my life, but I'm not really that strong physically. So I feel like in whatever way that you can fight, whatever your weapon is, and only you know, and this is mine.
Related to that, I'd like to try to contextualize some of the topics you cover in your songs.
Sure.
Because in your songs you talk about the history of the African American struggle for justice, for equal rights, about reclaiming the African American tradition, about neocolonialism, racist politics.
Wow.
Politics of representation of black women.
You get it. Oh my goodness, this is the best interview ever. Yes,
And,
I cover those things.
And also, over the last couple of years, the world has witnessed a series of horrible events which, again, brought to the surface the very racist and classist foundations of the Western society.
Right.
And in the U.S., particularly, there have been riots in Ferguson, Baltimore,
Right.
The mass shooting in Charleston Church.
Right.
And as an activist, Can you please comment on some of these events and
Right, like I was
the
just saying,
atmosphere?
I mean, to be honest, where do I start?
Exactly.
Where do I enter? Well, the thing is, there are people who, when they talk about it, they say like, all of these things are happening right now. It just seems like so much is going on, and there's this new wave of racism, and I disagree with that because I feel like throughout the course of my life, I've had a number of. I've had so many. I can't count on two hands. Mm-hmm. This is real, and it's been happening. It's not new. This is not a new wave of racist events. Like the institution is racist. We live within the institution of white supremacy and racism. So that's just what it is. I think the difference now is that now average, regular people have phones that have video possibilities. And like you can film. I think white America has been obviously in denial about everything. And now, to say, no, we have a black president, we're post-race. This is a post-race society. That means, what does that mean for you then when somebody says that this is racially motivated or that black people are being murdered in the streets, and then white police officers are saying, oh, I was defending myself, I was afraid for my life, until the video is released. And the so-called suspect is standing there, and there's no way possible that this person, this wasn't even a last resort. It was just like the first thing to think of was to pull out a gun and shoot this man 8 times in the back in South Carolina. Like what? Because black lives don't matter in America to white America. That's just what it's been. I mean, that was the mentality behind slavery. I mean, when was there a period where this was not the case? Where black people were not being over-policed, when there wasn't a prison industrial complex, like when we were not being attacked or terrorized, like where was the moment where this was not happening? I just talked to my grandmother about this. And my grandmother was like, like, when will this end? I've been asking this question throughout the entire span of my life. When I was a young woman, so was my mother. And so were her mothers. So, I mean, when people ask how I feel about it, I mean, well, what could you imagine? Like, yeah. When there have been 8 attacks on black churches just since last week, 8. And the mainstream American media will not cover it. I grew up in the church. When I found out about what happened in South Carolina, I just could not get out of bed for a whole day. It's too much. It's too much. I could talk about it to the end of time. I'm not gonna lie and say that I'm not angry. Like, and anybody who's not angry about it has to be crazy. Like, we're at war.
Yeah, a constant war.
Absolutely, yeah. Like this is a 400 war. This is a century-long war.
Yeah, but as a hip hop artist, you're very influential, and you can reach to a lot of young people. And I know that some hip hop performers have publicly reacted to some of these events.
Right.
But what was your reaction? Do you think that it's important to use your influence to address issues like these?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I said, whatever your weapons are. Then you, hello?
Yeah, it's a live talk, come on.
You gotta use them. So what was my reaction? What can I do? Like, I'm having conversations right now. On Monday, I was participating in a talk with Chuck D and Bakari Kitwana, discussing the very same thing. Thinking about what I can do with the music, or who I can organize with, how we could pull together in whatever way that I can. But it's not just, that's what I'm saying, this is ongoing. These are questions I've been asking myself, I guess, throughout my entire life. What can we do?
Yeah, it's a constant struggle. Now let's turn to music and activism. And I know that you've done some work with Tony Allen.
Yeah.
And he's an immensely important figure for Afrobeat music.
Right.
But again, can you tell us something more about him? How did you get to work with him? What he meant for you and your music? Because I don't know if the audience knows.
You know Tony
something.
Allen?
Do you know who Tony Allen was? Or is?
Is.
Was, sorry.
I mean,
What
Tony
a
Allen.
Freudian mistake.
Okay, so I met him. Just through. I think we had a show together a couple years ago, and that's how we were in contact. We always wanted to be in contact again, you know, whenever we see each other, because he lives in Paris. He's really, really cool, and I learned a lot from him. He's somebody, like, when you talk to him, he's so open, and I learned from him that music has no beginning and no end, and that every genre, every sound is valid. That's something that was really present in the conversations that we had. He's just a cool guy. I don't even remember, I have to think about how we met, but somehow we met. And it's just amazing to see him work, because he only has two hands. The question is, how is he playing that many grooves in one moment? Like, no overdub or nothing. Like, he only has two hands. It's amazing. It's really great.
So he was Fela Kuti's drummer
Right.
for a long period of time, and Fela Kuti's music was strongly political.
Right.
But what do you think? Is music political, or does it depend on the artist?
Well, everything is political. Everything can be
I agree.
politicized.
I
Everything
totally
is
agree.
political. So yes. What was the second part of the question?
Does it depend on the artist? But like you answered,
everything
it by
is political.
Saying, yeah. And apart from being an advocate for social justice in your music, you also do some community activism, as far as I know.
I try my best.
Yeah, but can you tell us something about it? I mean, I know I've read somewhere that you, on your music tours, you try to reach to local organizations
Yeah.
and do some educational workshops.
If
But
there's
why is
time.
that important?
Because what's the point of being here if you can't be of service? Like, being here for me is about serving the people. And like I said, like, it's very much clear that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Period. And that's I mean, for me, if I can't do that, then what's the point of doing it? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
That's amazing.
one person can't be free. Like, there's no such thing as an individual, like, you free here and the rest of us, like, that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
So, but you always have the, I mean, I can't speak for other people, but sometimes you have the feeling like it's never enough. So you know that I think a lot of people, you know, sometimes you wonder, is the music enough? Is this talk enough? What, you know, it just seems like it's so much from so many different angles. It's just so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, what can we do?
Yeah, I guess living here is a struggle. What's the place of women in hip hop? And has that changed over the years?
What is the place? I don't think that I'm qualified to say. The place for women in hip hop is for the women to decide where they want to be. What's your position? Like, what, you know?
But historically, was
Well,
it that they were
historically-
just figures in males' performance lyrics, or were they performing? Are they authors?
Well, I feel like, what's the place of women in the world?
Excellent point.
Like, that patriarchy is the institution. Sexism, I mean, it is what it is. So what's the role of women in the world? What's the position of women in the world? Like, when the reality is what it is, like, we haven't overthrown the institution. So hip hop is just going to be a reflection of that. And I mean, no, it's never been as many women in hip hop we as women, as a community of MCs in hip hop, have never been represented at a level that equals the male presence in hip hop.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. It's true that we had some moments in which there were more diverse representations of women in hip hop, and there were more women in hip hop. It was never enough, but there were more. Today, it's like one representation two representations for what it
Exactly.
means to be a woman in hip hop, and I find that to be problematic. But that's just mainstream. If you're not looking to the mainstream and you shut off that TV and you go online and you go to various edges of the earth, you'll find that there are a lot of women doing it. It just depends on where you're looking. There's a lot of women killing it.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Like,
Two songs from the Miners Canary are particularly interesting to me, Toni Morrison and One Woman. And in both of these songs, there's this woman figure who has the power and the privilege to represent a black woman's experience, if I understood it correctly.
okay.
But Toni Morrison has a pen, you have a microphone as a weapon. And how important is it that the oppressed social groups, such as women and black women more specifically, have the spokesperson in popular culture?
Well, like I said, it's important that, I mean, we need to be represented. Like, I think it's important that, you know, like, that we have our models. Like, we have to have women who speak out, speak our minds, our hearts. I mean, I think most groups of people have people representing them. Like, they feel represented through these individuals or through this group or through this government or whatever. I don't know if that's the answer to the question, but
Well, yeah,
that's why Toni
answers
Morrison
it,
was
yeah.
important. I felt
Yeah.
like she represented me. Like, this is the goddess, this is a genius. Like, she was my spokeswoman. She spoke for us, and it's a fight, and it just should not have to be. You know what I mean? Like, what is wrong with the fact that this group demands to be represented? You have to be able to see yourself to know to know your orientation, like where you're located, where you can go, where did you come from? You have to be able to see it. If you can't see it, what does that mean for you? If you can't see it,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? If as a woman, if you believe that all of the people who were great and who contributed significantly to society were men, how can you imagine yourself and who you can be and where you can go?
Yeah, it's a matter of identification as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's turn back to music. Enough with these hot topics. What do you think of Kendrick Lamar's album To Pimp a Butterfly?
I like it. I was really impressed. You know, I love Robert Glasper, and he has some great musicians on the album. And I was really floored by the fact that somebody that visible, that mainstream, could produce an album with that content. And I just thought it's about time. It was just a great arrival. And
I agree.
yeah, you need a music that's gonna speak to the minds and the hearts of the people. When I heard The Blacker the Berry, I was just like, wow, brilliant.
Great. Are you an underground or a mainstream hip hop performer? And is there such a division at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know. The division, I guess, when people start having a name to call this group of people through categories, then obviously, in order for me to label this and that and be labeled that, then there has to be a distinction in the mind of the speaker. So you would probably consider my music to be underground, but I'm not. I mean, clearly right now you talking to me and the ground is here, so I'm not under nothing. I'm just here on the
Clearly,
surface. So what is mainstream is like supposed to be what's supported by the corporation and as they have their agenda, and what's being supported by large amounts of money as these groups fight or like pay to get the music, you know, on placement and on certain platforms and a certain level of visibility. But I'm an independent artist and I don't have a connection to that. And that feels great.
Yeah, great. I have two short last questions.
Sure.
And we'll be very quick. Have you discovered any new music lately? Something
Yes.
to recommend us?
Yes, right now I just discovered Kamasi Washington's album, The Epic. And Thundercat just released a new album too. It's something about a wolf, I can't remember, Lone Wolf or something. I really like that a lot. But this Kamasi Washington album is like one of the best albums that I've heard in a long time.
Nice.
It's
Yeah,
a
we'll
lot.
take
It's a
it,
lot of
yeah.
information, but it's amazing.
And the last question, what do you think is your most popular song?
Well,
Have you ever thought of it?
No, let me think. I think I have a song called Poetry, How Does It Feel? And people love this song.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, people really love this song. From everywhere we go, like we get an amazing response. So I would have to say this song. And maybe because it's a song about love. It's
Yep.
very slow, so it's easy to understand what I'm saying. I have no idea, but people love it.
That was my impression, you know, in Serbia, like when you take a look at the Facebook and other social media networks, that How Does It Feel? Poetry is the most popular song,
Yeah, it's
definitely.
great. It's great because I put a lot of love in that thing, so it's nice
Yeah.
to know.
Thank you so much for talking to us. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Or if you maybe want to ask in Serbian, we can translate if it feels easier.
Okay, first of all, thanks for coming to this town. This is also my hometown,
Awesome.
where I grew up, and I'm very delighted that that this is the first town in Serbia that you've been to. And also, I was very surprised to see that you were welcome to Serbia. At first I didn't believe it. When I heard it through the social media, I was like, oh, seriously, wonderful. So, but my question would be, what are your plans for the future? Long term and short term? Just in short.
That's a hard question.
Well, not really. The thing is, I'm thinking about writing a novel.
Oh.
I wanted to write fiction. Because I'm doing, when I write songs, I'm creating a world. I'm a writer at the end of the day, so I was thinking about journeying. I mean, I'm not even that I was thinking about it, but I've decided that I'm gonna take more blocks, periods of time to focus on other aspects of writing, other kinds of writing, which I've done in the past, but just within the last 2 years, I haven't been able to because we've been touring a lot. But I mean, so that's one answer to the question. I still teach a course at the university right now. I'm teaching a master class at the Graduate School for Popular Music, and I'm sure that I will continue teaching. But you know, like music is what I love, and I hope that that doesn't stop. I feel like that's going to always be my long term in some way, shape, or form.
So thank you so much for coming to listen to this talk, and we'll see you all tonight.
Y'all gonna be there tonight?
Of course
You
they
like
are.
hip hop, jazz,
Yeah.
rock? Cool.
Thank
I'm happy
you.
to be in Serbia. Thank you for having me. Hvala.